Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Rom English Podcast. I'm Jennifer, and joining me today, as always, is Michael.
Hello, Jennifer, and hello to all our listeners.
Michael, today we have a topic that I bet everyone needs to hear. It's about how to immediately stop wasting time and achieve more with much less effort.
Absolutely. We're going to explore a productivity secret that has been around for over a century, applied in every field from business to personal life, the 80-20 rule, or the Pareto Principle. Jennifer, I can tell you're excited about this.
Because this rule completely transformed how I approach work. It made me realize that the majority of things we do every day are actually quite ineffective.
That is the core issue. Essentially, the Pareto Principle states that for many outcomes, roughly 80% of results come from just 20% of causes. In other words, 80% of your achievements come from 20% of your work.
It sounds crazy, but it's true. Most of us spend 80% of our time on trivial, time-consuming tasks that only yield 20% of the value.
And the goal of this episode is to help our audience identify that crucial 20% and eliminate the wasted 80%. Let's start with a bit of history. The rule is named after Vilfredo Pareto, who observed this pattern back in 1896. He noticed that 80% of the land in Italy was owned by 20% of the population.
A fascinating, almost accidental coincidence.
Exactly. Later, scientists and managers found this repeating across many different fields. For example, in business, 80% of revenue often comes from 20% of a company's customers, or 80% of software defects are caused by 20% of the code.
That shows this is a natural law, not just a simple time management trick. And applying it to personal productivity is truly an art of choice. We have to learn to ask, what are the 20% of actions that bring me the highest value?
Precisely, and those actions are not always the ones that make you feel busy. Often, 80% of our time is spent on checking emails, attending unnecessary meetings, or doing repetitive tasks.
I think the hardest part is identifying that 20%. It requires absolute honesty with yourself. You have to look at your to-do list and be brave enough to cut out the 80% of unnecessary tasks.
Right, and we'll dive into the technique for that. This is a principle that completely opposes the work harder mindset and replaces it with the work smarter mindset. So, how do our listeners find that crucial 20%, Jennifer?
I have a simple three-step process. Step one, list it. You must list all the tasks and activities you performed the past week, from answering emails to attending meetings to your core duties.
Very clear. And step two is analyzing the results, correct?
That's right. Step two, measure the outcomes. Next to each task, record the actual result it yielded. For example, revenue generated, project approved, high score achieved. Measure by real results, not by the time you spent.
Excellent. And step three is identify the 20%.
Exactly. After measuring, you'll clearly see only a few small tasks, 20% of the list, brought in the majority of the results, 80% of the outcome. This is your leverage point. For instance, for me, 80% of my podcast growth comes from the 20% of time I dedicate to researching breakthrough topics and connecting with quality guests.
This is vital. People often confuse efficiency with effectiveness. Doing many things doesn't mean you are effective. The 80-20 rule forces us to focus on effectiveness.
It helps us find the courage to say no to the 80% of things that simply don't matter.
Let's take an example in studies. Students often feel overwhelmed reading hundreds of pages of material.
True, but if you apply 80-20, 80% of your grades will come from the 20% of the core content and the types of exercises emphasized by the professor. Your job is to identify that 20% instead of trying to memorize everything.
Or in personal life, 80% of your happiness and emotional support may come from 20% of your closest relationships. This suggests we should invest quality time in those relationships instead of spreading our attention too thin across many superficial acquaintances.
This is what optimizing life is all about. The 80-20 rule isn't just about work. It's about living with intention, focusing your energy on what truly brings you value.
And in the next segment, we'll delve into how to eliminate that wasted 80%, turning awareness into action.
Now for the most exciting part, Michael. Once we've identified the crucial 20%, how can we immediately stop doing the remaining 80%?
This is where we must learn to wield the power of the word no. Most people struggle because of the fear of missing out, FOMO, or the fear of offending others.
Right, but the 80% waste often comes from unnecessary emails, meetings without a clear agenda, or tasks assigned that don't align with your main goals.
The strategy here is limit ineffective communication. Set fixed times during the day to check emails, such as only 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the evening. Don't let email interrupt your 20% block time.
For meetings, I always ask the organizer, what is the specific goal of the meeting and how do I contribute to achieving that goal? If the answer is not clear, I politely decline or ask for a summary afterward. This is an extremely effective 80% filtering tool.
That is a proactive mindset. If you don't control your schedule, someone else will do it for you. So, how do we apply this to the daily to-do list?
I use a technique called single focus. When looking at a list of 10 things to do, I force myself to mark one or two tasks, that's the 20%, whose completion will create the biggest impact.
And what about the other tasks?
The other tasks are either postponed, delegated to someone else, or eliminated entirely. You must never start your workday with small, easy, low-value tasks. You must tackle the biggest frog, the hardest, most important task, immediately.
Very much in line with Brian Tracy. This is how you create productivity momentum. By completing the most crucial 20% task in the morning, you've ensured 80% of your day's success.
And one more point, the 80-20 rule can be applied recursively. Once you've identified the most important 20%, you can apply the 80-20 rule to that 20% itself.
That's right, it's a continuous filtering process. 20% of 20% is only 4% of extremely crucial actions, yielding 64% of the results. This is how individuals achieve superhuman productivity. Let's take this rule beyond the personal scope and look at business.
This is where the 80-20 rule truly shines. If you're a business owner, look at your financial reports. 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of your customers.
So what is the necessary action?
Stop trying to please all 100% of your customers immediately. Invest 80% of your effort into nurturing, building relationships with, and developing products for that 20% of gold standard customers. They deserve the highest priority.
In other words, stop wasting marketing resources on customers who only make small, one-time purchases. Conversely, find ways to retain and upsell to those who already trust you and bring in the most significant profit.
This also applies to product portfolios. 80% of profit may come from 20% of your core products. Be brave enough to eliminate or minimize resources for the remaining 80% of underperforming products.
Jennifer, we have to address the pitfalls of applying this rule. What is the biggest misconception?
The biggest misconception is that people think it has to be exactly 80%. This is not a law of physics. It's just a general principle. It could be 70-30, 90-10, or even 99-1. The key is to find the uneven distribution in the results.
And what is the biggest challenge?
It is procrastination. People often procrastinate on the 20% crucial tasks, which are usually difficult, requiring high focus, and dive into the 80% of easy, repetitive tasks to feel busy. This is the biggest emotional trap.
Exactly. The 80-20 rule demands discipline and consistency. You must constantly track and measure your results. What was once the crucial 20% may no longer be true next quarter.
That's right. This is an analysis tool, not a recipe. If you don't take the time to analyze your outcomes, you will never know what the truly valuable 20% is.
It can also cause conflict. Saying no to non-essential tasks might initially upset others, but in the long run, it helps you focus on real results, and that's what gets recognized.
Let's summarize some specific, actionable advice for our audience.
Certainly. Advice number 1, right after listening to this episode, list your 10 biggest accomplishments over the past 6 months.
Advice number 2, identify the 2 tasks, 20%, you believe generated 80% of those achievements. Be honest.
Advice number 3, in the coming week, dedicate 80% of your working time to focus on only those 2 tasks. Eliminate, delegate, or postpone everything else.
Remember, the 80-20 rule is the compass that helps you find leverage in your life and work. Don't work harder, work smarter. Focus on the small actions that bring big results.
Thank you for listening. Start applying the 80-20 rule today to stop wasting time and unlock your true productivity.
We'll catch you next time on Productivity Accelerator.